So let's start it.
Okay.
Okay, let's go.
So let me begin by sharing with you what I believe is the most important contribution that Parmenides made to philosophy.
Okay.
So you'll recall that philosophy, according to its name, is the love of wisdom. And the method of philosophy then is to seek out true knowledge. And you see, Jason, in my opinion, there are two main ways that a philosopher can obtain the wisdom he seeks. One way is by perceiving the world through the senses. We can get a lot of good information about the world through the senses. And the other way is by using the intellect to form generalities and then to manipulate these generalities using logical forms like syllogisms until interesting results are produced. The first way through the senses leads us to scientific knowledge, and it's called the empirical method. And the second way leads us to mathematical knowledge, and it's called the rationalistic method. And depending on which method one finds most appealing, one will become either, or at least mainly, attached to one approach or the other, empiricist or rationalist. Anyway, it seems to me that Parmenides is the founder of the rationalist tradition. Rather than trusting the senses, he attempts to form first principles from innate a priori truths that he discovers through reflection. Taking these a priori truths, he builds a logical system. Sure, the system he builds is weird and counterintuitive, and it's probably a view we're not likely to accept. But Parmenides, nevertheless, can be given much credit because he plays a significant role in the history of philosophy by using this method of taking a priori principles and building a system through reason and deduction in the first place. Now, here's a further thought related to why Parmenides' philosophy might be considered important. Within the history of ideas, the rationalistic method will become extremely powerful and influential, particularly during the Middle Ages, because pure rational thought related to pure perfect absolutes becomes the ideal method of thinking about God. So it's during this time that Parmenides' methodology becomes most important, as for example, with thinkers like Anselm. However, in our own age, when certain philosophers like Heidegger and Tillich attempt to bring God through the back door by calling God by the name of pure being, Parmenides has once again become important. So Parmenides is as relevant today as he was 2,500 years ago when Parmenides first taught, and that's why we need to study him and discuss him today.
Okay, let me challenge you a little bit. So why don't you give this title to Pythagorean?
Because we're not reading Pythagoras in McGill.
But Pythagoras is before Parmenides. Okay, so Pythagoras should have the same importance as, if you say Parmenides is this important, then why not Pythagoras?
Because Parmenides develops the pure form of the rationalist philosophy approach, which is to, first of all, reflect so that one understands a priori principles, and then to use those principles through pure logic to develop a system of philosophy. Parmenides, although he does understand that there is an abstract substratum in the world, doesn't explain where his a priori principles come from. He simply gives us a lot of numbers and associates those with what we observe through the senses. So, although Pythagoras should be given credit for understanding that there's an abstract substratum in the world, he can't be given credit for the rationalist methodology, which is based on a priori principles and pure logic.
Okay, I got your point. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so let's move on.
Okay. So anyway, the last little thing I want to say about Parmenides, along the lines of the way that Parmenides might be considered important for the way he influenced Western religious thinking, let me add this. Parmenides sought knowledge of what was perfect and incorruptible. incorruptible. In this respect, it's easy to conclude that he was searching in his philosophy for what we might call God. If God, who is perfect, eternal, and incorruptible, is still important to modern man, then Parmenides must be given credit as the first important theologian, whether he would accept the title or not. He applies reason and logic to a monistic system which he believes is divine. Therefore, he's the first important theologian in the Judeo-Christian tradition. He can break down reality. We can break down reality into two approaches. There is empiricism, which is this worldly investigation through the senses, and there is rationalism, which tends towards otherworldly investigation, primarily using reason and revelation. The second method is often associated with idealism, perfectionism, mysticism, and purity, whereas the first approach is often based on this worldly realism and consequentialism. As we proceed through different philosophers and their systems represented in McGill, we're going to become familiar with both types of philosophers, each with their own separate characteristics appropriate to each group. It's important, before dismissing one philosophy or another on the basis that is weird or improbable, to try to grasp the deeper meaning of the philosophy, including the way it might have implanted foundational roots, which might have aided others to achieve their goals. So this last little portion that I just stated backs up your idea that he's a religious thinker. But it goes further in claiming that religious thinkers can be separated from non-religious, secular, more materialist thinkers. And so Parmenides can be considered not only the first rationalist, but also one of the first religious rationalists, which is going to have a very important influence in philosophy. What do you think?
Yeah,
I can't hear you.
I like your term about a religious rationalist. Okay.
Yes, religious
Because
rationalists, like
this
Anselm.
term, yeah, this term cannot, this title cannot give to Pythagorean or Pythagoreanism because they are not rationalists.
No, they're not rationalists and they're
They
not
are
religious in
they
the
are
same way.
they are mathematical religions.
Mathematics is a religion.
Yes,
That's the difference.
that's very different than what they are doing. So okay,
No, but what strikes me in particular, Jason, is how similar this philosophy is to the theology of the Middle Ages. You know, we're
yeah,
going to be reading a lot of theology where they're going to be declaring how perfect God is and how they're going to be using this sort of rationalist method to describe God's perfection. And
that's why make the a Christian very different than the all other religion in this world. You know.
that is so true.
Yeah, it's that's why religious, well,
It
Christian,
makes
well,
it different from all. I
that's why a
agree.
lot of people say, a lot of philosophers, Christian is the best, the only, in a way,
It's the best because it is the only one to describe perfection and otherworldly idealism, right? That's
yeah,
why
and
people
the
consider it the best.
use rationality, okay,
And
yeah,
the use of rationality,
yeah,
exactly.
it's very difficult. This job is very difficult, and then that's that's what
That I think is, I agree with that so much that it not only you can describe this as similar to, it's not quite accurate to describe this philosophy of Parmenides as just theology, because there are many different types of theology, but this is most similar to the Christian tradition of theology. And
yeah.
because there are so many important Christian thinkers that we're going to be studying, I just think we should keep in the back of our mind roots in Parmenides.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's start. Let me share
Okay,
this.
let's start.
Okay, go.
Parmenides, it seems, began his philosophical career as a Pythagorean, but when still a young man, he attained the insight that reality consists of a solid, homogeneous sphere, the appearances of diversity and change being altogether illusory. He set out this extraordinary doctrine in a poem in hexameter verses, consisting of a proem, a section, The Way of the Truth, expounding and defending the theory of the sphere, and a section, The Way of Opinion, in which he dealt with current, probably Pythagorean, scientific theories. The proem and the important The Way of the Truth had been preserved substantially intact, but only a few fragments of The Way of the Opinion survives or remains.
Let me see. Okay, so is anything we need to talk about this? He's
Sure.
disciple from the Pythagorean school.
What about the Pythagorean school?
No, he's related to Pythagorean. Okay, Pythagorean school. Okay.
How is it related to Pythagorean school?
Well,
Is there something in this paragraph which relates
yeah,
it?
in which he deal with current, probably Pythagorean scientific theory. And then I read another Gassery, the history of Greek philosophy. He talk about he possible is from the Pythagorean school. You know, he learned from Pythagorean. That's one of the opinion.
So in the secondary source that you read,
Yeah,
what you read is that there's quite a big influence from Pythagoras, right?
that's right. Yeah, and so the author believe he probably the disciple or at least the study with the Pythagorean school as a beginning.
Okay.
Which I
I
kind
read
of
that he may have started his studies in a Pythagorean school. Well, we know that Pythagoras was located in the same part of Italy, southern Italy, not very far away, so that would make sense. But let me just say that my secondary sources did not stress Pythagoras's influence. They stressed Xenophanes' influence and Anaximander's influence. And the influence of Anaximander would be that
I would not disagree with you this one, you know,
about
because
Xenophanes, right?
yes.
Yeah.
But
Because
since
Xenophanes also was a
he is
monistic
in the
philosopher who talked a lot about God.
yes, okay, because on the Italian side are more religious. Okay, put this way.
Yeah. And as far as Anaximander is a representative of the untruth, the way of opinion. So basically, what your secondary source said was that Parmenides is attacking Pythagoras's views. What my secondary sources said is that he's attacking Anaximander's views.
Okay,
The way of the opinion, the third section.
I just want to say the thing is this because his relation with Pythagoras. Last time we talked about the opposite in the
the opposite
table of the opposition. Okay, that's from Pythagoras, right? Okay.
What? Well, oh yeah, the columns of opposites. Yeah.
Okay, so I find the table. Okay, I find the table.
Good.
Okay, basically talk about active and the passive. Fire and night, bright, dark, sky, earth, hot, cold, dry, moist, real, dense, light, heavy, right, left, male, female, soft, hot. Okay, so they deal in a different way. Okay, because they start from this, but they deal in a different way. Pythagorean deal with they are different thing. Okay, Okay, I don't know what's the Pythagorean the solution, but basically, and then what Parmenides want to deal is you cannot have two opposites exist at the same time. So you need to find the solution on that. I think that's their
Oh, I see. So
the
that's your
different
thinking.
idea on that. They all look at this same table, okay?
Oh,
But they have a different way of thinking. Okay. So
yeah.
this table is so obvious, right? I think around the world, even the very primary tribe, okay, they will have this concept. They may not this as table, but they all know, okay. They have the hot, they have the cold, they have high, tall people, they have short people, they have fat people, they have skinny people, they have male, they have female, there's adult, they have children. But how do we deal with this situation? That's the philosophy. So I think that's their starting point, right?
So that's what they argue. Okay, well, let me mention what the secondary sources I read were talking about. They weren't talking about that chart. They were talking about the scientific speculation that Anaximander did about how the stars came into being and how the Earth turns, various aspects of astronomy and the world. And from what I understand about the third section, that is what Parmenides is reconstructing, is a kind of explanatory science text of the world. Doesn't talk about opposites. He talks about how the moon is reflection of the sun and various other, ideas related to geology and astronomy.
Yeah, I think the difference is some want to accept the opposite, some doesn't want to accept the opposite, right? Like Heraclitus definitely see black and white exist at the same time is not the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can move to the.
Yeah, let's move on. All right. The proem is an elaborate allegorical description of Parmenides' journey into heaven. In a chariot drawn by immortal mares, he is conducted upward by the daughters of the sun, who bring him to the gates of the ways of night and day, the keys to which severely chastising justice holds. At the entreaties of the maidens, justice opens the portals, revealing the goddess, justice, who addresses Parmenides.
Yeah, that's his prologue. I think here he called the proms, right? Proms, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's his proem. Yeah.
And then that probably the tradition during the time, when you write something, you should always, just like Homer's tradition, you have to start with God. I think that's why he has this prologue.
Well, that's very interesting. What was interesting to me was the way he breaks tradition, because Homer begins by a petition to the muses, right?
I think that's the
begin.
tradition I'm talking about,
Yeah.
So.
However, the way that Parmenides breaks tradition is that instead of appealing to the muses, who are the daughters of memory, he appeals to the daughters of the sun, which are quite different. The daughters of the sun and the daughters of memory. And that's a big break, because both Hesiod and Homer and other poetry at the time all appealed to the muses. This was not an appeal to the muses. It was an appeal to the daughters of the sun.
That's interesting.
Now, okay. There are many reasons why that's significant, but one is that the muses were the daughters of memory. So in order to write a poem like Homer's Odyssey or Iliad, the muses were petitioned to give him help with his memory. Well, memory is a record of what we sense. And the sun in this philosophical work seems to represent an abstract type of intellect.
Probably is related in the enlightenment and the
Enlightenment, exactly.
later on the Plato's the sun metaphor. Okay.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, probably
And
that's
just
the thing.
adding to
And
that,
then I believe the son, the daughters of son, probably that's probably his invention. Okay, put this way.
he invented it, but I believe Plato, reading Parmenides, used the sun, and because he was, because I believe he was such an avid follower of Parmenides, I think that he took that sun image and used it as his own. And
So
remember
in this
that
way, I always think Plato is Pythagorean, but actually he should be more Parmenidean than Pythagorean, right?
absolutely. And you want to know something? Your insights are always so similar to mine because I was reading this, and the more I learned about Parmenides, the more I realized this is where Plato got his inspiration. And I also in the past always thought that his chief influence was Pythagoras until I started doing research for this.
Yeah,
Now
I
I'm a
think
big
he's
believer.
more
Parmenides is
Parmenidean.
everything.
Yeah, Parmenidean than Pythagorean. Right? So okay, I think
That's what I think also. Yeah. And so anyway, this image of the sun in Plato comes right after the cave, okay?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so you have this dark and light. And it's interesting that in this poem, they don't make a big deal of it in McGill, but the caves of day and night refer to, are an allusion to the underworld. And in the poem are a lot of different references to the underworld, Hades, okay? And when Anthony, who's a big fan of Parmenides, he's always referring to the idea that Parmenides believes that truth comes from the unconscious, because that's a pet idea that um, uh, that Anthony has. I think it's just the opposite. I think that the poem begins in the underworld, just like Plato begins in the cave, and then ascends to the sun and later descends back into the underworld.
I'm not sure he's from the underworld because I read the prologue and basically he said that the daughter of the son take the chariot and
Yeah.
bring him to the gate, right? And then and I don't know when did he wrote this one, but he talked about when he was young, right? The daughter of son call him this young man. Okay, so
Yeah, he wrote it when he was young.
I
Or
don't know he wrote it
he
young
might
or
be just
when
referring, like Dante.
I'm not sure he wrote
I agree.
yeah,
I
yeah,
agree.
because
He could
he
have been
talked
older and writing about when he was young, because apparently, according to secondary sources, they all mentioned that when he was young, he received this great inspiration.
yeah.
Anyway, another important thing is that this whole scene of the poem reminds me of a lot of scenes in the Bible where there is some tremendous revelation and a prophet or someone else is swooped up into heaven, and there's a lot of this similar imagery. So it's another example of the way that this is a religious attitude which is reflected in other religious writing.
Yeah. Okay. So we can move on.
Yeah.
Okay. Stuff from OU.
Let me just say that most of my talking is going to be at the beginning of today.
I know. Yeah.
I don't have very much at the end.
I probably have a lot.
I just wanted to reassure you that I'm not going to be talking for hours and hours so you can't get out until 4 o'clock or something.
Okay, let's move on.
Okay. O youth who come to our mansion in the company of immortal charioteers, welcome. It was no evil fate, but right and justice that set you to travel on this way, far indeed from the path trodden by men. Meet it is that you should inquire into all things, the unshaking heart of well-rounded truth, as well as the opinions of mortals, in which is no true confidence at all. Yet nonetheless you shall learn all things, even how seeming things, all passing through each, must really be.
Okay, this one is copy from you shall learn. Okay, let me ask you the question here. The text said, you shall inquire into all things, the unshaken heart of well-rounded truth. Okay, so he need to learn the unshaken unshaken heart of well-rounded truth, as well as the opinion of mortal. So he need to learn both, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so I just want to make sure it's clear. So
What's the
that's
question?
why he has a two section, right? One is the way of truth and the way of opinion, something like this. Right?
Well, there, scholars have a lot of different theories about why he included both the truth and the view that comes simply from opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But the
Just
view
1 minute, yeah. Okay, so let's start. Yeah.
okay. So, well, there are a lot of different. Are you asking why he includes the last section?
No. I just want to make sure that the daughters of son want to teach him both. Okay, both uh, the truth and the opinion. That's the only thing I want to know.
Yes, she wants to show him both the way of truth and opinion. But why do you think that so much attention is given to an explanation of the world that is not true? Why do you think that
Well, you should know the other side. You should how stupid the mortal is. Then then to me it's obvious. The reason is obvious.
uh-huh.
Okay, so I don't see that art to have both.
Well, let me ask you this. I'm as usual, I'm impressed by you and your insight. But let me ask you this. Is there any other philosopher who employs a similar strategy in giving so much time and attention to bad ideas?
Yeah, Plato's allegory of cave. He talking about in the shadow. He also spent a lot of time talking about, people in the cave doing something. So, I think it's reasonable.
Okay,
Okay.
that's a pretty good answer. I like that.
Yeah.
But you have to admit it's slightly different because Plato doesn't elaborate some long, complicated explanation of
Well,
how everything works and
but
later to declare, and
in
this is
his
all wrong, by the way.
since we don't know, okay, how much we missed, right? They have the two sections. One section called the way of truth, the other section called the way of appearance. And the way of appearance is not that long, it's short.
Oh,
Okay.
but
But
everything,
but
let me
but
just tell
people
you,
scholar believe there's some part missing. Okay.
more than some parts, they believe that the actual text is extremely long,
Already.
6 times larger than the way of truth.
Well, if I were Parmenides, I would spend a lot of time describe what's the way of appearance. That's pretty
That's
simple
great. Okay.
because I have the causing, then I have to tell people why you will see this, right? Since the word is this, then I need to say a lot of just like Buddha's teaching. Okay, the word everything is emptiness. Okay, you cannot say emptiness. Okay, stop here because empty, I don't have to say. You have to talk about why this illusion here, why you have the desire. Okay, you have to explain it. So to me, it's obvious. Okay.
Okay, all right, very good.
Because the core philosophy is not that complicated. So since it is monism, so that's not much to talk about. If pantheism, right? They have a lot to talk because there's many gods you want to talk. So there's too many things. So for this philosophy, I don't see, well, it's necessary to talk about the second part. That's it.
Okay. All right, I'm ready to go on. Shall I read the next section?
Yeah, the goddess.
The goddess warns Parmenides against relying on the senses for knowledge of reality. Keep your thought away from the way of inquiry, and by no means let much tried custom force you this way to ply the unseeming eye and the ringing ear and the tongue, considered as the organ of taste, not of speech. Rather, judge by reason the much disputed proof which I expound. The much disputed proof is strictly a priori, depending altogether on the law of identity. Well, then, I shall tell you, and do you attend and listen to my word. What are the only ways of inquiry that are to think of? The first is that it is, and that it is impossible for it not to be, in the way of conviction, for it follows truth. The other, that it is not, and that it must needs not be. That, I tell you, is a path that none can learn of at all. For you could not perceive what is not, that is impossible, not even think of it, for it is the same thing that can be thought and that can be.
Okay, so first question here he talk about the reason, by reason, okay? So I believe the word in Greek they use must be logos, right?
Don't
I mean,
know,
is there possible for other words?
probably.
I don't think so. Uh, there's no other words uh, used for reason other than logos. At least that's what I uh, understand. You disagree?
Well, let me just say that in secondary sources, I never ran into anyone who translated that word as logos. So I'm really not sure.
Well, but they use reason, right? So he talk about reasons. Okay, so what Greek words we can use?
I don't
Only
know.
logos. And my big uh they probably well anyway, that's my question, and I think it's logos. Okay.
Mhm.
You you
So
you,
what
don't- you
importance would that have for you?
well because Heraclitus also talk about logos. Okay. So that's my idea. I think the probably they are using the same word, but they focus on different way. Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah.
So Heraclitus talk about logos is which is something not how to say not your more on the dialectics, okay, words, okay, rational,
Mhm.
okay, so, okay, rationality. And this logos in Parmenides is more on logic, okay. But again, there's no word for logic in ancient Greek also, okay. So it could be the same words uh, in different meaning. Okay, so I think it's very possible.
Okay, I'll accept that.
Yeah,
But
it's
whatever word is used, it does seem to be a different sense of the word
that's
than
right.
what Claire was using.
Yeah, and it's very common in the ancient time, right? For example, you want to call something logic, but there's no word for logic, right? In Greek, in Chinese, in Egypt, I believe, since that's primary people or ancient people, their words are not sophisticated like today. So
Well, many people consider Aristotle the founder of logic because
that's
he
right.
described logical deduction. But I read a secondary source that I like, which said that Parmenides is the true founder of logic.
But again, that's the reason, logo. Okay, here they say reason, and there could be logo. And the word logic is derived from logos, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I believe that's the case.
Yeah, so it's a particular kind of reason.
Pretty kind of the logo. Okay, that's a pretty say.
Yeah.
uh,
Whole
okay.
topic of what a philosopher regards as true reason is so complex, and there are so many different definitions of reason. Just look at when Kant talks about pure reason and practical reason. He's using reason in a different sense.
Oh, that's a totally different sense. Don't bring.
That's what I'm saying. That the
Yeah,
word,
you are
reason
right.
has so many different.
His reason means the human faculties. Okay, let's put this way. Okay.
Yeah,
Uh, Move on.
yeah. The goddess's expression
Hold on. That's should be. Okay, here, go
The
ahead.
goddess's expression are puzzling, for it is not English or Greek either to say simply it is. We want to know what the it stands for, and if it is, say, a radish, still the expression a radish is makes no sense. A radish is what? Nevertheless, the sense of the passage is unmistakable. If there is something real, and there is, then whatever characters it has just those characters and none other. A is A. It is impossible to think of A not being A, for to say that A is not A would be in effect to say that the thing having the character C does not have the character C. And this would amount to saying something and immediately retracting it, so that altogether nothing was said. It is in this sense that it is the same thing that can be thought and that can be. The goddess did not mean, of course, that there must be mermaids in the ocean because we could think of them. She meant that reality and thought must alike be non-contradictory.
Yeah, I think one thing here is very possible. The language problem, okay, because he keep talking about what is and what is not, okay. Because is as a be verb, it could means predicate or existence, right? So Parmenides probably confused the two part, right? A is, okay, A exists and or A is something. So I think that's a confused part because the be verb in Greek and all the Western world. So I think that's the first part. And the second part I will argue is this thought is very similar to Descartes' thinking about what be clear and distinct in your mind is real. So mermaid, okay, you can think about mermaid. So since you cannot have something is and is not, so I have to think of something mermaid, but there's no mermaid. So you have to go either way. So both Descartes and Parmenides believe what in your mind is real. I think that's the Parmenides tried to do, and that's why eventually he developed a very strange and weird conclusion on his philosophy.
Yeah, okay.
You will nothing disagree?
I know. I like it.
Okay, move on.
Yeah. All this is perhaps innocent enough, but the goddess is going to use the principle thus laid down as a weapon to destroy belief in the reality of the world revealed by the senses. The first step is to draw the corollary, for this shall never be proved, that what is not is. That what is not is, for it is possible for what is nothing to be. The thought is that the word nothing means that which is not. Consequently, any sentence having the word nothing as its subject and is as its verb must be contradictory, not to be thought of.
So I think it's the same thing, right? Nothing is I think it's the same thing. Nothing is there, or nothing is, cannot be true, because nothing is equal to what is not, and what is not is, right? So nothing can exist, right? If you say yes, I think that's a little bit in the language game, right? Because nothing is nothing. Okay, so nothing is what is not. What is not is wrong because it's contrary. I think that's the situation become. It sounds a little bit simple, but when you think through, probably sometimes drive you crazy because that's the word we are using. Okay, so that at least that's my my feeling about.
Oh, well, that's fair, I think.
Yeah, that's chapter 7. Nothing. Yeah, what is not is nothing, right? So, and then he also believed there's, if we reject something, right? You cannot say this is this cup, right? I can say this is white, but I cannot say this is not white. But I cannot say this is not black, because not black means in infinite number of color, which doesn't exist. I think he reject the existence of infinity. Okay, so you cannot say this is like Jim is not a dog. Well, you cannot say that, because that means you have many possibility. Too many.
I don't really see that, but I don't really know. Maybe you're onto something.
Yes, I probably.
What I do see is that nothing is unimaginable, because nothing is no thing. And if there is no thing, then there is nothing to imagine. So it's unimaginable. So because you can't imagine it, then that means it
Yeah, that's a
equivalent to
good argument.
non-existent.
That's a good way to look at it. And the same as four-sided triangle, right? It's unimaginable. Okay, so they should not exist. And in this way, nothing should not exist. And if nothing doesn't exist, then you should not say something is not. That's another way to look at it. Yeah.
But is there a sentence in this paragraph which, there's two basic ideas.
Oh,
One is the idea of nothing, but then the other one is this cup is not white. You can't say that because that introduces infinity. I don't
that's
really
my idea. That's
that.
not that's I derived this idea.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's not in the text. I agree with you. Yeah, that's not in the text.
I'm not sure that I get that out of it. But let me ask you something, because I know you're interested in philosophy of nothingness, because you know you studied Zen and
Yeah.
Confucian philosophy. Does this approximate some of the ideas that we get in Eastern philosophy?
Well, to me, I see they see the same thing, but just go to the different direction, right? If you go to Hinduism, right, they probably start to think this is right. Can I think about nothing, right? But their idea is yes, I cannot think about nothing, but eventually it's from nothing. So, very example is all human, Indian, Greek, Chinese, American, everybody will think about something doesn't exist, mermaid, okay, unicorn, okay. They have this one. Then the next question would be, how come I think about unicorn, but there's no unicorn? I think about mermaid, but there's no mermaid, right? So does a mermaid exist? So two ways to think about it. One is, yes, it exists in our mind. In our world, we may not find it, but it exists somewhere. Another way to think about it is, no, nothing exists. So original from nothing. So include in the world, we see Jim, we see this cup. That's start from nothing. Okay. So I think that would be the two direction you can go, because you see conflicts here, right? I can think about mermaid, but there's no mermaid. If we people can say, okay, yeah, that's illusion, that's reality. That's one way to look at. But you want to go more religious, you will say, no, that must be consistent. There are only two ways you can go. One is everything you think about is there. All you think about is nothing there. Okay, so I think that's the, you know.
Okay, thanks. All right, next paragraph. Is it having established
All
all this?
all this, yeah.
All this is perhaps innocent enough, but the goddess is going to use the principle thus laid down as a weapon to destroy belief in the reality of the world revealed by the senses. The first step is to draw the corollary, for this shall never be proved that what is not is.
Why you stop?
You sure we didn't read this?
No, yeah, we already read. Sorry. We
Okay,
should put this a
the
heavy
next
possibility.
paragraph.
Yeah.
Having established this, it is easy for the goddess to prove that what is uncreated and undestructible. For what birth of it will you seek out? In what way and from what source its increase? I forbid you to say or to think that it came from what is not. For how what is not could be is neither speakable nor thinkable. The argument implied is a simple dilemma. If there is an origin of what is, that origin must be either what is or what is not. But it cannot be what is not, for if so, the contradictory sentence, what is not is the origin of what is, would be true, which is absurd. And of course, to say that the origin of what is what is, while in the same sense true, is so only trivially. Therefore, what is uncreated.
What you want to say on this one?
He's coming up to an argument, which is that what is cannot be caused by what is not. Therefore, change is impossible. Therefore, if change is impossible, what is eternal and incorruptible and perfect. So that's going to be his larger argument.
Yeah, I think this paragraph haven't talked about the changes impossible.
No,
yet.
that's the implication that
Yeah,
comes
but
later.
basically talking about first, can come from nothing, right? Or
Yes.
disappear into nothing. That's primacy, right? He didn't argue why this.
It's obvious. It's self-evident. Nothing can come from something. I mean, nothing can
Well,
come from nothing.
ex nihilo, because the
Well,
God.
that's the only solution. That's where the Christians were finally able to find great value in this whole philosophy, because
Yeah,
then
by reject bring the God, the all powerful, omniscient, uh, omnipotent God. Okay, so he can create, right? Yeah, but without this, nothing can come from nothing or disappear into nothing can disappear into nothing. And then if you only have one reality, with these two premises, right? Premises, then change is not possible. I think that's his argument.
I agree, and it is a very profound thought.
You think that's a profound thought?
Yes, I think it's a profound thought to
I think it's the wrong
philosophize
premise,
about
right? Because
nothing. Nothing
usually,
can come out of nothing.
yeah, I would disagree. It's a profound thought. I would say that's a start from an simple premises, which to some people, some culture may see it's obvious, but for example, like you ask in people live in India 2,000, 3,000 years ago. You say nothing come from nothing, they will say
Yeah.
no. Who says so? Okay. I think that's all you ask the uh, Jews, okay, they will say, no, God create from nothing. The world is created from nothing. So I would say the premises is wrong. That's you know, not carefully investigate the premises. I think that's my point.
I
Yeah.
understand your argument.
Yeah.
But let me tell you what my argument is. That I'm viewing this particular rule as being a rule of how everything in life is organized. And it seems to me that by understanding in a profound way how that rule operates, that's the origin of all science, because there can be no cause, there can be no event which is uncaused. Now, there are so many different I call this rule conservation of reality. There are so many different applications of this rule and that are so important to the advance in science. And one might be able to argue that all of the great science that's ever been created has come about through this one rule.
Yes,
For example, it might seem
you are
obvious.
talking about the Parmenides contribution, right? So
Yeah. We're talking about Parmenides' contribution and how important that single rule is. Now, last week I was all excited about Heraclitus because, of course, I believe in the yin and the yang and strife and complementary agonisms and everything everything that suggests. But another large principle of the universe as a whole is that nothing can come from nothing. You can't get anything from nothing. That is the foundation of all science. And I mean,
yeah,
I could
but
go on and on about,
yeah, I think your argument is focused on the science, but
yeah,
I
my
see this.
argument is focused on science, and I
Yeah,
think that
but
is,
my argument is on the beginning, right? At the very fundamental principle. How does this world start at the times, at the origin, at the start, right? I can see a few different ways to think about, right? So one way to think about is the world start from chaos, okay? It's totally chaos, okay? Nothing clear, okay?
where's the chaos come from?
Well, because you have to start from 0 point. That's the chaos. Okay, just like you don't ask Parmenides, where's the oneness coming from? Okay, because you got to have something. You cannot ask a
No,
quick
no, you do ask him that. And he solves that.
how.
He says that oneness is eternal. He has
Yeah.
an answer which modern scientists and cosmologists do not have. Because what we say, what our tended interpretation is, that the universe originated 13.8 billion years ago when the singularity began expanding. But where does the singularity come from? This is one of the hardest
Well,
questions.
I think it's the same situation. You can ask the question of Judaism, Jews, right? Where's God coming from? That's the same question. Okay. Okay. So then your answer is eternal, right?
Yeah,
So okay, I think it's
that's a good answer.
yeah,
That
and
is
the
at
same.
least an answer.
Okay, same as the US Hinduism. Okay, so where's the nothing coming from? Because they believe they start from nothing, right? Okay, everything starts from nothing. Okay, so you can ask where's nothing? Nothingness coming from? Okay, is that from
Well,
another world? All right.
my answer to that would be that you don't have to explain nothing, because what you have to explain is how something can come from nothing. So
Yeah.
if you have nothing to begin with, then you don't have to explain it, because that doesn't violate the rule.
Well, so if you say that, then Hinduism start from nothing, you don't have to answer it,
That's
right?
right.
Because they already answer.
They
Okay,
begin with
this word
nothing.
coming
They
from
don't
nothing.
violate the rule.
Yeah, same as the chaos, right? The beginning is chaos. You don't ask where is chaos coming from, because the world, okay, coming from chaos gradually form the world, right? So you already answered the question, okay? And that's why I like to bring the point is they probably have 4 different ways to start this world. One is ex nihilo, okay, God created the world. Okay, that's the Christian way. Second would be the Hinduism way. That's the nothing. Okay, everything is empty. It's going to empty. Okay, whatever you see is illusion, which is totally opposite from Parmenides. That's
That's not
oneness.
bad,
Yeah, it's oneness,
It
right?
doesn't have to, he doesn't violate the rule of
No, it
being
doesn't want.
coming from nothing, because there is no being.
Yeah, and then oneness, same thing, right? It's the same as Parmenides. Doesn't violate the rule
The
because
world, that the universe is eternal, right? Eternal.
yeah, that's one. And what you see, Jim, Jason, Michael, whoever, that's just illusion or your appearance. What do you see, right? You will see hot and the cold. That's just appearance, right? Same. I think that's the same as Hindus thinking, right? And then because everything
I
is
don't think it is the same, because I don't think that Parmenides emphasizes illusion. I think he emphasizes the fact that he does believe in being,
well,
whereas the Hindus do not. He believes that being exists.
well,
It's
just
just
same,
that his solution is that being doesn't have an original point. It
same as
always existed.
same as Hinduism. They believe that
Hinduism has a nothingness, though.
yeah, that's the beginning.
Well, what's the fourth anyway?
I mean,
What's the fourth interpretation?
chaos, which you argue, okay, it's because the world
I
formed from
hate
chaos.
that, because chaos is being. Chaos is a kind of being. Everybody knows that. So where does the chaos come from?
Where does the being come from?
Being is eternal. And nothingness, you don't have to, it doesn't violate a rule. Chaos is something.
Chaos, but being also
Let's go back to my view of the universe, which is that the universe is a well-defined entity. Let's just say that cosmologists describe it as being 70 billion light years across. So it's an entity that exists. What about the outer boundaries? What is beyond the outer boundaries. Nothing. This is where I love Parmenides, because he reflects my thinking exactly. You don't need to worry about dimension when you are talking about nothingness. So the universe is a self-contained geometric whole with a particular length, and we don't have to worry about what's outside the boundary, because outside the boundary is nothingness. You know how I've been talking about that, and I've been sharing that idea.
Well, but
And I just ran into a YouTube video which said the same thing, so I was really happy about
well,
that.
but the later philosophy in the same school, the Melissus, right? He rejected this one.
Yeah, and I think his reasons are terrible.
Well, that's like totally a
We're gonna get into Melissa.
I think this part we have to disagree on many things because
You disagree with, you think Melissus has a good argument?
at least better than Parmenides. Okay, so because Parmenides doesn't explain how does the sphere outside limited is. Okay, same.
Nothingness is outside the mirror.
Well, same as you argue the nothingness, same as you argue about chaos, right? What's chaos? Is something being. Chaos is different than being. Okay, even between being and non-being that mix together. Okay, so I think that's the difference in that. Okay, so let's move on.
Okay.
Just
Are we at the goddess advances another argument?
we are on the goddess. Yes, you are right. Yeah.
All right. The goddess advances another argument to prove the same conclusion. And if it came from nothing, what need could have been made it arise later rather than sooner? This is really an argument from an assumed causal principle, even if the objection be waived that what is not is unthinkable. Mere nothingness or negation could not, by definition, afford any reason or cause why something, if it were to originate out of it, would suddenly appear at one time rather than another. But without such a reason, nothing could appear at any time. Hence, if there ever were a time at which there was just nothing at all, then there never could be anything at any other time. This argument was attractive to many subsequent philosophers, being urged by St. Thomas Aquinas and Thomas Hobbes, among others.
Okay, let me see. Why put the Aquinas and the Hobbes here? Because the determinism?
Remember that Hobbes has 5 arguments for God based on reason. And one of the 5 arguments has to do with the fact that there can be no uncaused cause. There can be no event that is uncaused.
That's Aristotle's argument, the first cause.
Yeah, well, don't forget that Aquinas gets most of his philosophy from.
Oh, you talk about
Aristotle.
Aquinas, the 5 arguments, right? Okay, so
Yeah.
here
I didn't know that Hobbes argued the same thing, but my God, it's so reasonable.
what
It's the same problem we have with the beginning of our universe. Why did it begin 13.8 billion years ago? All these people argue that they know what was going on. There was a singularity that was the size of an atom. But why did it at that moment suddenly, start expanding?
that's the God coming from. That's why, that's back to our previous argument. You talk about being, okay, eternal, okay. So
yeah, it's back to our previous argument. What they're
yeah.
bringing up here is that the argument about being is similar and parallel to the argument about causation. Just as you can't have matter exist from nothing, you also can't have cause exist from nothing. These are 2 of the biggest principles and questions in all of science and philosophy.
McGill said, okay, the last sentence in parentheses, this argument was attractive to many subsequent philosophers, being urged by St. Thomas Aquinas and Thomas Hobbes, among others.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
You talk about question. Because the being,
the causation one. that you can't have something uncaused.
And the Thomas Hobbes. Okay.
I'm not familiar with Hobbes. I know
So
that that's
sounds like
that's
that's
part of Thomas Aquinas's famous argument, though, because Thomas Aquinas deals with questions of the beginning of time and the beginning of the universe.
okay. So you probably have the same problem as I have. Why Thomas Hobbes, right?
I don't know about Hobbes, but
Yeah,
I
that's
really would like to spend more time on Hobbes and find out, because I like so much of what he has. Well, I like his agenda in general.
okay. We will deal with him later. So
We'll deal with him much later, years later.
okay. Let's move on.
All right, a similar argument, not given, would show that annihilation is also impossible. This is generation, extinguished, and destruction not to be heard of.
We probably go to
Okay, sure. So
yeah.
far, the conclusions reached are only such as were agreed to by all Greek philosophers, both before and after Parmenides. Nothing comes from nothing, and nothing disappears into nothing. Should I read the next paragraph?
Yeah, let's go to the next
Okay.
paragraph.
But nor is it divisible, since it is all alike, and there is no more of it in one place than in another, to hinder it from holding together, nor less of it. But it is completely filled with what is. Wherefore it is wholly continuous, for what is in contact with what is. It is immovable in the bonds of mighty change, not starting, not stopping, since generation and destruction have been banished afar, driven back by true conviction. Wherefore all these things are but names which mortals have given, believing them to be true. Generation and destruction, being and not being, change of place and alteration of bright color. These astounding conclusions are drawn as corollaries without further argument. Motion was supposed to be impossible because if anything were to move, it would have to move into empty space. But since empty space would be what is not, there cannot be any empty space. As for alteration of bright color or other qualitative change, this could not take place either, for if an apple previously green were to become red, this would entail the disappearance of the greenness into nothing and the appearance of redness from nothing, both equally impossible because contradictory.
Okay, so here is a lot. And then basically he is talking about change is impossible. Everything is indivisible, right? Indivisible. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, that's just the main point of this last argument.
It's
Before that, the small argument that you wanted me to rush through said that not only can't you get something from nothing, but you also can't extinguish something into nothing.
That's right. Yeah, that's in.
Which is a great, principle of science that is applied in so many different ways. Basically, you could summarize all of the principles of science as being reality is conserved. And what's amazing to me is that it took thousands of years.
So you talk about this is the
Years.
originate of the concept of conservation, the law of conservation. Let me see. And the talk about motion is not possible. Basics, the apple change from green to red. That's also not possible. Okay,
Yeah.
because what is red cannot be green. So, blah, blah, blah. And that's why he need Zeno of Elias to help him to prove many things. The flying arrow is not
Why does he
possible.
need Zeno? It's obvious you can't get something from nothing. So
Well,
how do you get green from
one
red?
one important thing is you do see apple change from green to red. You do see something moving. I shoot the arrow, it fly over there. That's why, Zeno, okay, the paradox is used to show, okay, his teacher, Parmenides, is right, because you see the arrow flying from here to there. Actually, it's not really moving. Okay, just like Achilles cannot move, okay, to catch up a tortoise. Okay, I think that's the purpose of Zeno. And in this sense, Zeno did a great job to.
So could you explain to me again, because I know you've studied this more than I have. I understand the Achilles story, but I'm not sure I understand the reasoning behind the arrow. Why doesn't the arrow move?
Because the arrow doesn't move. Okay, that's Zeno try to
Why
prove.
not?
Huh?
What's the proof?
Because at any moment, right? You take
It's instantaneous, right?
yeah,
Any
instantaneous.
moment it's not moving. Yeah.
It's not that it's moving, right? So okay, so you tell the purpose of Zeno. I think I read that one from McGill is very important. Before I
Yeah, I
always
agree.
thought that's
Okay, I get it.
yeah, it's
I
not.
just had to be reminded of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's not the relativism. He is not the skepticism. He is not a sophist. He is a Parmenidean, okay, because he used this one to prove Parmenides is right, okay, because there's nothing really changed. You see, Achilles, he technically he cannot run over or catch up a tortoise because he's not moving at all. Okay, nothing is moving. Okay, I think that's all Zeno tried to say.
Yeah. I don't think he really needs Zeno though myself, because
Yeah.
it's obvious to me that something can't come from nothing.
Because you believe Parmenides, so I need Zeno. You don't need Zeno. So,
No. You know, the Zeno,
Anthony
you
doesn't need
like Zeno and I don't, has to do with the fact that your background is in computer programming and you love logical arguments, whereas I think of them as sophistical. You know, to me, using logic to prove something absurd like that is an example of sophistry. And
Oh, come
so
on.
I don't think he proves anything. I think he just, plays with words.
You
And
mean Zeno just play with words?
yeah, Zeno, yeah.
I think just the opposite. Okay.
You think Parmenides plays with
Yeah,
words.
Parmenides play with the basic.
Zeno gives a solid argument.
Yeah, get you try to solid argument because even it's wrong, but he get a solid argument again to prove something which is not so right. Okay, so
That's good.
let's go to the next paragraph. Is here, right? The
Okay.
last surprise.
The last surprise the goddess has for Parmenides is this: it abides the same, remaining in the same place by itself. Thus it stays rooted to the spot. For a mighty necessity keeps it in the bonds of a limit which shuts it in round about. For this reason it is not right that what is should be without an end. For it is not wanting. If it were, there would be need of everything. Since then it has an outermost boundary, it is limited from every side, like the mass of a well-rounded sphere, extending equally from the center in every direction. This emphatic assertion of a spatial limit is what is to what is perhaps the hardest for us to absorb, since we immediately are led to ask in Parmenidean fashion what is outside it. If more than what is, then what is no limit after all. But if what is outside of what is, what is not, then it cannot exist as a limit. And indeed, Parmenides' follower, Melissus of Samos, ventured to correct the master on this point. He asserted that what is spatially infinite. Parmenides' thought seems to have been that infinity, being without end, entails incompleteness, hence could not be predicated of what is, which is perfect. And indeed, it was characteristic of Greek thought to prefer the tidy to the vast. But this at most extenuates Parmenides without acquitting him of manifest inconsistency.
So here we talk about the Melissus, okay, to extend. Yeah. So here is, let me see my note. So here it has, okay, just 1 minute. I probably have something to talk. Verse 16, let me see. Since then it has an outermost boundary. It is limited from every side, like the mass of a well-rounded sphere extending equally from the center in every direction. That's how he developed the to resolve the space, okay, to avoid to face infinity. Anything else you want to say about this?
Yes, I want
Go
to go
ahead.
back to comparison with Anselm. A large part of Parmenides's philosophy seems to be based on this thought. First of all, being is perfect. The reason it's perfect is because it is eternal, because if it weren't eternal, then that would involve change, and change is impossible. So therefore, being is perfect. And because it is perfect, then it cannot contain any imperfection. So that is why it's pictured as a sphere with limitation, because if it went in all directions, then that would involve an incompleteness, because infinity would go on forever and perfection is complete. Okay, so that's his argument. Now I'm going to go to Anselm's argument. Anselm's argument is the exact reverse, but it comes out to the same conclusion. He starts off by saying God is perfect.
Oh, I got
Therefore,
it. Yeah.
God exists. See the difference? In the first
Okay.
one, Parmenides says being exists, therefore it's perfect, and then goes on to explain all of these other qualities of being, like it's a sphere. Parmenides begins with God is perfect, and then goes on to conclude all of these other qualities like existence. So I just think that that is part of the ideal religious rationalist method.
Okay, got your
Feels
point.
self-evident to them, and that is as far as the argument goes.
Okay, so basically you put about Saint Anselm, start with the definition of God, then divide to beings, and the Parmenides start from being, right? And then become a perfect. He didn't say that's God, but basics, that's the same
No,
flavor.
but he sort of implies it. But in any
Yeah.
case, yeah, but then he goes on to the qualities of God and gives it the
Why, when we talk about so many in philosophy, why do you not talking about Spinoza?
I would bring up Spinoza. In fact,
Okay.
I thought about Spinoza quite a bit. And in fact, I've thought about him a lot. First of all, when we discussed Heraclitus, I believe that the most important influence in modern times of Heraclitus is on Spinoza. And then, through the Stoics. And I also thought about Spinoza a lot, because Spinoza takes all of his notions of perfection and divinity from Descartes, and Descartes comes directly from Parmenides. So believe me, Spinoza
Okay.
is never out of my mind.
Okay, so I just remind you. Okay, so that's we can move on. So we
Yeah.
are okay. That's good.
Okay, next paragraph. Here shall I close my trustworthy reasoning and thinking for you about the truth, says the goddess. Henceforward, learn the beliefs of mortals, giving ear to the deceptive order of my words. After this unpromising beginning, there follows an account of the nature of things, more in keeping with the general tenor of early Greek thought. We learn, for instance, that Parmenides understood that the moon shines by light borrowed from the sun. But the fragments of this part of the poem are too few for us to reconstruct the system at all. The purpose of including it seems to have been to forestall derisive criticism of Parmenides as ignorant of the science of his day. I'm telling you everything about this plausible cosmology so that you may not be surpassed in insight by any mortal.
So here, this paragraph try to prove Parmenides is not anti-science. Okay, so I think that's the reason. Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, that's what McGill tried to say, right? In this paragraph.
I think what McGill is saying is that the reason that Parmenides included this whole section, which let's call it scientific, is that he wanted to show people that the reason that he was arguing for the way of truth is that it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that he lacks scientific knowledge. See? So he wanted to show that just in case anyone was wondering about whether I can't compete with the best of them, just take a look at this. And so by showing that he was able to do science as well or as better than any other scientist, nobody could criticize Parmenides saying that, oh, you just don't know science. See, that's what I think McGill is saying here, which is different than saying that he's not anti-science. Actually, he's very anti-science because he actually
so your point
argues
of
that
view
science is false opinion.
I think that's important to discuss this one. So your point is Parmenides knows science. He knew science.
He knew science backwards
But
and
he is
forwards.
anti-science.
But he's anti-science. Exactly. So
Just like you say that the religious leader, okay, he is totally superstitious, okay, on everything. But you say, well, he's not ignorant. He got the PhD from UCLA, the physics degree in PhD, right? That's the same situation you are talking about.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly the same.
Or
With a PhD from Caltech who won Nobel Prizes.
and they
then
become
he
a
would
religious
say,
leader.
and God created man in the Garden of Eden. And then he would come up with this giant paper showing how, amazing much he knew in science. That would be the same thing.
Well, I just read probably totally opposite way. Okay.
Wow.
I read in a different way. I read is this because his belief of oneness, he belief of everything we see as appearance, which is the mortal. Okay. For this reason, he can think in a different way, scientific way, and understand the light of moon is borrowed from sun. Okay, because it's nothing by itself. It's all illusion, same as the light of moon is illusion. Okay, so I think that's
really?
what.
I never. That is funny.
What does it also make sense, right?
That's a totally different way than I've ever heard it explained. Everybody gives credit to Parmenides for the first one to describe the moon's light as coming from the sun's reflection. So it was a great scientific advance on his part. Nobody talks about it in terms of borrowing, having to do with some kind of.
I think that's consistent with his philosophy. Everything is not real, just like moon. So only the person who has this kind of weird concept will develop the idea okay, will accept the idea. What you see, the shining moon, is not its own light. It's borrowed somewhere.
Okay.
And I will not surprise. He will do further research. Then the sun is hot and shining bright because it's internal some reaction caused that, not itself. See, they have the black spot on the sun. Okay, that prove it. It's dark origin. Okay, what you see just appearance, not the real sun. I think that's the philosophy would lead us to think about this way.
Okay.
So you seem to not so agree on this way.
No, I guess not. But Parmenides is open to many interpretations.
Well, okay, so that's I think, so okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
I'm surprised we think of so different in this way. So
That's a good thing, in my opinion.
of course,
There are
only
many, there are many interpretations.
okay, that's to the end to the modern student.
To the modern student, perhaps the most puzzling thing about Parmenides is the fact that his successor, including especially Plato, had so much reverence for him and took his arguments so seriously. Should I go on?
Yeah, let's move on.
Okay. Of course, no serious thinker in the 5th century BC could dismiss Parmenides' conclusion merely on the ground that they were incompatible with observed fact. For philosophy, which was still a new enterprise, consisted in an investigation of the world by reason. And if, in general, the senses provided the data for the inquiry, no philosopher considered himself bound to conclude that things are all in respects as they appear to be. If the senses declared things to be thus and so, but reason indicated that they were otherwise, it was not by any means unheard of to dismiss the observations as deceptive. In throwing out all observation, Parmenides only carried to an extreme a pre-existing practice.
So here you're talking about, that's what you're talking about. He is anti-science. That's the last sentence in McGill. In throwing out all observation, Parmenides only carry to an extreme to pre-existing practice, which, do you agree on this or no?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, but I'm thinking just a little bit, it's a little bit different, okay? He probably not anti-science. Okay, I still will stick with this argument. And then he just reject the science method of observation. Okay, he want
That's
to
the same
use,
thing.
but it's not
That's what
anti-science.
science is. Science is an empirical study that uses observation.
Well, but okay, so that's your definition of science method.
Yes.
Okay, but he put another way. Okay, I think that's clear on our previous disagreement on that, because you said, okay, the science method is start from observation. But another way to talk about science method is to reject observation, okay, by real thinking, because so many observations are wrong. For example, the stick put in the water, you see is crooked, okay, it's bended, which is wrong. So we should be very careful to reject, very careful about what you see. I think that's the different starting point, and that's how Parmenides can develop the idea of moon borrow the light from sun, because that's not what we observed.
Okay, good. That's fair. Okay,
Move on.
yeah.
Okay, there's a
I want you to understand that I thought I understand your argument now better.
Great.
You're emphasizing the non-empirical part of science, which
That's
is
right.
not based on observation,
That's
and I'm
right.
emphasizing the empirical part. That's
Yeah,
where
that's right. And of course, we all know the fact in the 21st century, we all know you cannot just close your door and by just thinking in the drawing board, develop science. And we also know there's no way just believe whatever you see as truth and to develop science. We all know that's today's situation, but we are talking about in the ancient time or the very fundamental idea.
yeah.
Okay, I think here he talked about the four things we probably want to.
Yeah, I'm going to read them all at once.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
In the second place.
In the second place, Parmenides, the founder of formal logic, simply deduced the logical conclusion of the assumptions agreed on by his predecessors. These assumptions were, number one, monism, the stuff, whether water, the boundless mist, or fire, of which all things are made, is at base of one kind only. Two, conservation of stuff. This stuff as such is eternal, being neither created nor destroyed, neither augmented nor diminished. Three, a refusal to distinguish, or rather the non-occurrence of the idea of distinguishing between what we should call the qualities of things and things qualified. Thus, heat and brightness were not thought of as properties of a fire substance in itself inaccessible to observation. Heat and brightness literally constituted fire. For lack of a better word, we may call this assumption phenomenalism. And number four, the reality of change.
Okay, we can stop here. I think this McGill make a good summary on this one. Okay, for the
Yeah,
four.
sure.
And this four, we can say that's his assumption, right? It's that's he didn't argue on that. That's he take as an axiom, okay, as a self-evident. Okay.
Yeah.
So monism and then conservation of stuff. And I think this one is a very great contribution in the later time in the Europe, the conservation of stuff. Okay. Nothing comes from nothing. Nothing disappears into nothing. That's very scientific. Let's put it this way, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's
And
right.
then number three, I think that's a very interesting assumption. Basically, he's talking about there's no such thing as a substance or attribute, right? The attribute is the substance. Okay, so water includes the liquidness, okay, and the coldness. Okay, that's the idea, and McGill call it phenomenalism. Okay, so
Yeah.
okay, and the number four is the reality of changes. Okay, so we will talk about the number four later, but here. But I'd like to mention about number three, about the phenomenalism. Okay, if you remember, I don't want to go too far away from the argument of a Chinese philosophy on the school of names. Okay, do you remember the argument of the white horse is not horse? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the same concept of if you put the whiteness, the white horse as a whiteness and the horseness, right? So of course, white horses is not horse because there's a white element is there. So in this kind of concept will be very different than Aristotle's concept, right? Aristotle is the one who separates the attribute and the essence. Okay, so that's a part I like to mention. I don't know, is there anything you want to talk about?
But don't you think when you talk about Aristotle, don't you say that aren't you trying to say that he separates the attributes from the substance?
Yeah.
Not essence, right?
No,
Yeah.
substance.
Yeah,
Well,
that's great. Yeah,
yeah, that's the difference. Yeah.
yeah. That was a tremendous advance by Aristotle.
I don't know. It's before Parmenides, does ancient or pre-Socratic philosophers separate the attribute and the substance?
No, they didn't.
They
Which is,
all think that's the same thing. They
yeah,
don't separate the uh
they didn't separate substance from attributes, and they thought that the attributes were as real and substantial as what we think of as substance.
oh, that's why Anaxagoras was the like uh uh the snow has a blackness there, something like this, right?
No, I see that as different.
Okay, so that's it. Okay, so in your point of view, Aristotle is the first one to separate the.
Yeah, he's the first one that does it clearly. I don't know. We're going to be reading these other philosophers pretty soon, so we'll see. But he's the one that I use to orient myself in, regard to this topic.
Okay, all right, that's great. Yeah. Okay,
I
that's
just wanted to point out something ironic and interesting, that when McGill talks about fire as being really heat and light,
Mhm.
instead of looking at fire as a substance, what is ironic to me is that one of the most important advances in modern science and chemistry was discovering that fire is not a substance.
Yeah, that's what's
So
the
to
name?
use this as an example of how substance is conserved
Yeah, yeah.
is exactly the opposite.
Peterson. What's the
It's just humorous because fire is such a strange phenomenon.
Yeah. Okay. So what's they call the term start with Philean? Do you know what's the
Phlogiston.
word? Huh?
Phlogiston.
Philistine,
They
right?
used to call phlogiston what they used to, consider that was the substance that, appeared during the phenomenon of fire, until they realized that there is no substance of fire. It's simply the atoms undergoing motion.
Yeah, yeah, phlogiston, right? Phlogiston, right? That's used to call
Yeah,
the
phlogiston.
phlogiston because
Phlogiston. Yeah.
yeah. They are improved, but they are improved in the wrong way. So
Yeah. Okay. Once these assumptions are made explicit, Parmenides' philosophy becomes in a certain way obvious. If the stuff of things is ungenerated and indestructible, and if that stuff consists of its sensible qualities, then it is out of the question for it to change. For to say that it changes is precisely to say that it has a property at one time that it lacks at another, a conclusion that contradicts assumptions 2 and 3. Thus, what is must be at least frozen. But furthermore, there cannot be any diversity in it if the premise of monism is taken seriously.
okay, so here I believe Parmenides reject the existence of vacuum, right? So
Isn't that in the next paragraph?
oh, probably I skipped. Yeah, that's right. You are right.
That's the next paragraph.
So here is talking about the what's it? Yeah. You are right. Yeah. So probably we should move on that next
Yeah,
one.
because this last paragraph is just a review of what we've already talked about.
Yes, that's
It
right.
just
Okay.
talks
So
about the fact that the qualities and attributes can't change. Okay. Parmenides' argument against motion on the ground that motion requires empty space, and empty space would be what is not, and therefore non-existence, is an obvious sophism. Oddly, though, his successors, Empedocles and Anaxagoras, deferred to it and denied the possibility of a vacuum. They attempted to make reason square with observation by giving up the postulate of monism in favor of 6 kinds of stuff, Empedocles, or as many stuffs as there are perceived differences, Anaxagoras, and they tried to account for motion in a plenum as displacement, illustrated by a fish swimming in a jar full of water. Failing to see that the argument that empty space would be nothing is independent of Parmenides' main contentions, and that change is inconsistent with the postulates of conservation and phenomenalism, they exposed themselves to the Parmenidean rebuttal of Melissus, who pointed out if there were many, these would have to be of the same kind as I say that the one is. For if there is earth and water and iron and air and iron and gold and fire, and if one thing is living and another dead, and if things are black and white and all that men say they really are, if that is so, and if we see and hear aright, each one of these must be such as we first decided, and they cannot be changed or altered, but each must be just as it is.
Okay, so here is talking about I think the big situation is concept of vacuum, right? So
yeah, that's one of the big ideas.
Okay, the question I'm going to ask is, does Aristotle and Plato accept the concept of vacuum?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure. Okay, okay. That's then another question is, the first philosopher accept the concept of vacuum is Democritus?
I believe so.
For sure, Descartes, right, accept the concept of vacuum.
Descartes?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, by that time, scientific experiments have been done to prove that there was a vacuum.
Yeah, the reason I'm talking about this is that to me is quite important because you think about like this situation. That's why I ask you about Aristotle. Uh, I believe both Aristotle and Plato doesn't believe the existence of vacuum.
I believe you're right.
Okay, so if you think about the situation, right? If you don't believe there has a vacuum, then everything move in this world is replacement, right? It's just fish in the water. I take this space, I have to replace to another place, right? Just fish swim in the water. You have to do it. So think about it. How do they think about the motion or movement? The quality of thing will decide the mobility of this of stuff. So the mobility become the attribute of a thing because you don't have the vacuum. Okay. But if you have a vacuum, the concept could be totally different because the Newtonian movement is not depend on the quality of thing. It depends on the outside, the field, the gravity. So to me, that's a very important concept about vacuum. If there's no vacuum, you will always very easy to think about the mobility is the attribute of thing. Like a mountain is no mobility. Okay, a rock has a mobility because you can move a rock because the quality of thing, not because the field or the outside situation. I think that's that's how I think the concept of vacuum is quite important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything about this you want to say about vacuum or on this
Yes.
own paragraph?
I think that one thing I just looked up Aristotle and Plato, and they both definitely, strongly disagreed that vacuum could exist.
Okay. Yeah.
Aristotle's argument was because he believed that motion occurred with the help of the substance that is in, air. He thought that if there was nothing to help move objects along, then it would go at an infinite speed. And Plato didn't talk a lot about the material world. But what I've always found interesting is when Timaeus is describing how the world was made by the demiurge, then he talks about creating different objects that participate in forms, but he says that they all move in a receptacle. I've always found that very interesting, that word receptacle, because Plato, we normally think of Plato as just believing in forms. But in the Timaeus, which gives his cosmogony and the way that everything originated, he has a definite name for and description of the receptacle. What do you think about that? The receptacle, because that corresponds with my own view of the universe, which is just because there's a void, doesn't mean that there's nothingness. There is something there. And it's a place where objects are permitted to move. Objects can permitted to move in the empty space of the universe because it's not nothing, it's something. It's a receptacle.
Well, does that similar
Empty space
to,
is not nothing, it's something.
does
And
that
it has different properties. It just doesn't have objects.
does this concept coming from the Empedocles about the compulsion and attraction?
No. Why do you mean the idea of the receptacle? Does that come from attraction? No, it comes from the fact that space is a thing. And Plato, when he describes the origination of the universe and how everything started in the Timaeus, you're right, this famous dialogue of Timaeus where he describes where everything came from, he makes sure to include the fact that it's not moving around in empty space. Everything is inside a receptacle. That's how I picture the universe. Remember, for me, the universe is bounded, and outside the boundaries is nothingness. Inside the universe, even where there's a void, is something. And I think one way to describe it is as a receptacle, because that's where objects move about. So they move about in, not a void, unless you define void as empty of objects, but as inside a receptacle.
Okay.
So
they don't, so nobody believe the existence of vacuum, just like they don't believe the infinity exists.
You mean modern cosmologists, or you mean?
No. I talk about the ancient Greek time.
So none of them believe in a vacuum. No, I'm not sure about Democritus, actually. I'm not sure about Democritus. We'll have to find when we run into Democritus. He might believe in a void. He might believe in a vacuum.
That's I kind of see if you are an atomist, you need to believe void exists. Otherwise,
yeah, I think that was their great advance.
that's my logical thinking, because I think if you are the atomist, it would be very hard. You will say everything will, then you need to make sure that in this world, all this one are filled with atom. Okay. Including the the space. Okay. I think that would be become a very difficult and strange theory. That's why I think
Well,
Democritus
I
would
don't know
be
why, but for me, I just I think it's more reasonable to assume that there
is some atom
might be
called
a
empty.
void, but there is no place in the universe which is nothingness. There there might be a void, but the void is a type of substance which, just like the fish swim in the water, objects need to move through the substance that is empty space. In other words, empty space is a thing that contains properties. It's not nothing. Right?
Yeah, okay. So I think we will leave this question to when we
Okay.
discuss.
All right.
Okay.
We're going
So
to run into it again.
yes. Okay. So let's go
Okay.
to.
Where do we begin now?
I think so, in fact, right?
Okay. In fact, if Parmenides' conclusions are to be escaped without abandoning either conservation or logic, it is necessary, besides clearing up the quibble about empty and nothing, to do two things. First, to distinguish between a thing and its properties, to abandon phenomenalism. Second, to distinguish within properties between qualities and relations. F.H. Bradley's Appearance and Reality showed as late as 1893 how if the reality of relations is denied, if relations are conceived as qualities or predicates of the thing related, then a Parmenidean view of reality is inescapable. Of the ancients, Democritus, Plato, and Aristotle were the only philosophers who displayed some grasp of Parmenides' essential points and tried to come to grips with them. It is doubtful whether any of them was altogether successful.
Actually, I'm not very sure what McGill tried to say here.
Well, the first thing to discuss in regard to this paragraph is the mention of Bradley.
Yes.
So the question might arise, why is he bringing up Bradley?
That's a big question.
But I'm sort of familiar with Bradley, so I have kind of an answer because
Okay,
I
please.
remember when we studied him.
You
And
talk about appearance and the reality.
appearance and reality, exactly.
Yeah, that's the only thing I remember.
Right. And Bradley, of course, was a British idealist.
Yeah, he's Hegelian.
Yeah, more or less.
Okay, neo-Hegelian.
He's influenced a lot by Hegel, yeah, but he has his own spin. But the main thing is that he's an idealist rather than a materialist. But the other thing that I noted about him when we were studying him before was that he had a weird concept of what was real. And he spent thousands of pages describing why there are no differences in the world, that all differences are illusory. And
he did
there are
so?
no real differences, that everything really is one unity. So that's a good reason to bring him up now, because he has a lot of similarities and he has a very eccentric view of reality that reminds me a lot of Parmenides.
But here in McGill talking about relation when he talks
Yes,
about
that's another important part of Bradley, that he spends a lot of time talking about relations,
yeah.
which I gather goes something like this. Bradley spends a lot of time describing qualities of substances because ultimately he's going to reject all matter and substance. So let's say we have a quality like hot. Is hot a property of an object? Well, that's one way to look at hotness, but another way is that it is a relation with cold. So when he's talking about relations, he's discussing properties as not being attached to the substances, but as being related to other properties. In other words, they don't have real existence. Does hotness exist, or is it a relation to other, properties.
So Bradley's point is, what's Bradley's point about
Bradley's point is that the universe is a unity and that properties are illusory. And so, you know, he wants to point out, one of the points he makes is that a lot of times when we're looking at properties or attributes, that what we're really looking at is relations. Now, I never.
Oh, okay. I think I got the point here.
Yeah.
Okay.
As much as I
So
can explain it. I mean,
yeah, so
I'm not an
think,
expert in Bradley because I
well,
didn't want to be, really.
I don't. You want to be the expert
I
about
didn't
Bradley?
want to be an expert in
No,
Bradley.
I just no sane people want to be expert about Bradley.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I
There's not
studied
so
with
much, you know, he wrote these long books that were like
I know, I
800.
remember it's a suffering to, I bought the original book. It's a suffer to
And they
read.
were all extremely abstract.
Yeah,
Just
so
really.
he's the
And
reason.
what he wanted to prove ultimately was this semi-Parmenidean view of reality, which was totally against common sense.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, right now I understand because when I think we read Bradley, I think McGill has two Bradley, right?
One of them is excellent. His book on ethics is
Oh yeah,
beautiful.
ethics. I like it. I like ethics. So we read
We both
ethics.
liked it. We love his
We
book on ethics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we read the essay first. I like it, but then I thought I was excited to read his second appearance as reality. Then almost killed me, and then so
Yeah.
right now I understand, and I kind of excited to visit again on this book.
Yeah, me too. Well,
Because
I'm excited to read his ethics again. I don't know how excited I am to read his.
I like it because I remember the suffering when I read appearance and I didn't know. I don't think the McGill mentioned about permanency when
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
okay. So right now I know the relationship. Okay, so they
Right.
will tell
Yes.
me, even I disagree with him, I hate this philosophy, but it
Right.
would be easier for me to understand where he coming. He's a resurrection of permanency in 19th century. Let's put it this way. Okay.
Exactly.
So I
That's
think that
exactly how I felt when I realized that Parmenides was saying exactly the thing as Anselm. Much as I have always hated Anselm, I'm
I know you
finally
hate Ansel.
beginning to appreciate him more now that I see his roots in
Okay.
Parmenides.
Yeah, I think that's why it's important to study permanencies. So, because a lot of people we dislike, we know who should blame on.
That's right, exactly.
Uh,
Okay,
uh,
second to the last paragraph.
where shall we read? Outer boundary, right? Is it from here?
Isn't it? It should not be thought.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. It should not be thought, however, that Parmenides' philosophy is free of internal problems. Besides the difficulty of the outermost boundary, the most obvious one is this: it is not sufficient to reject sense experience or anything else as illusion unless one can at least show the possibility of explaining, consistently with one's general position, how the illusion occurs. But such a possibility seems to be ruled out in Parmenides' system. For if we assume that in reality there exists nothing but a homogeneous rigid sphere, it seems that there cannot be any illusions at all, since in order for there to be an illusion, there must really be a mind that is deceived, and a mind is by its very nature something that is changing, or at least implies change. It thinks now one thought, now another.
So here talking about McGill try to challenge.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, what's
Yeah,
the
exactly.
outmost boundary, right? That's come with the solution of Melissa's, right?
Well, he considered that his greatest flaw whereas I consider the outermost
Yeah, I
boundary
know. I'm not going to
greatest
argue.
merit. So that's
Yeah,
the
okay.
difference.
So I'm not going to argue with you on this one.
But
Since
then the other part, which is how do you, if you
how
don't
the
have
illusion
things,
occur? Okay.
how do you, it's basically,
I think that's a big question. Okay,
I do too.
same as the Hinduism argument, right? Everything is Maya. How does Maya happen? Okay, that's a question you need to answer another one, right? Okay, so unless you want to bring God, God make you think this way. So, uh,
God is so often the answer.
and
You know,
the
that's one
second
of my
part,
criticisms. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, and then McGill also make a good argument on the second part. He talk about illusion is from your mind, and the mind also means changes, right? Since everything is
Good
in
point.
your mind is changing. Then you say
Yeah,
changes
that's a good point.
Then I think that's a pretty good point.
I do too.
Yeah.
And it's common for philosophers who are very eccentric and develop these intricate systems ultimately to fail because you can't explain consciousness. You can't explain, you have these giant systems that are constructed, but you can't explain how the individual fits into the system or how everything originated.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we agree on that.
I agree. I think the McGill made a good comment to that. Yeah.
But let me defend Parmenides, okay?
Okay, go ahead.
Parmenides doesn't describe, in my opinion, an airtight system. He doesn't explain, he doesn't construct an argument which can't be criticized. Does that mean that he's a failure as a philosopher? No, not from my way of thinking, because my way of thinking is that philosophers should not be judged on the basis of whether they construct something perfect, but only how far insofar as they advance a particular methodology or paradigm. He is the inventor of the rationalist idealist who believes that innate ideas can be used to logically construct truth. So that's all he needs to do, as far as I'm concerned. He doesn't have to have something perfect. He just has to advance the argument.
I agree with you because I think it's all great philosophers need to be somewhat eccentric. Okay, have some eccentric idea.
Yeah, it has to be extreme. It has to be.
Otherwise, well, we saw great philosopher. Okay, so that means
Exactly.
people keep talking about them for 1,000 years. Okay,
Exactly.
so they got to have extension. Otherwise, just like my grandma. Okay, she's a
My
great
grandma
philosopher.
has it. Yeah,
Yeah, but
exactly.
nobody talk about her except myself because it works. It's normal. It's common sense. So, so nothing work, right?
You
So
and I agree exactly. It
yeah,
has to
same
be
as
extreme and eccentric.
Descartes, right? That's the crazy idea, right? This world is not so turn out it's just totally separate the mind and the body. Okay, it's the most crazy, and you can bring the same thing as Kant. Okay, Numenar and the phenomena. That's
Yeah.
anyway.
No, I agree. I totally
Yeah,
agree.
so
Now, I want to mention one other thing, which I don't know if it's in the last paragraph or not. Maybe I'll read the last paragraph.
yeah, that one is very long. It will end. Yeah, so
Yeah,
go
but
ahead. Let's finish
there
it.
is one more comment I want to make about how Parmenides identifies reality with truth. That's a
Okay.
very important idea, but I'll bring that up at the end.
Okay,
There
go
is
ahead.
the further paradox that Parmenides, in effect, reduced one of his premises to absurdity. As a matter of strict logic, all that Parmenides proved was that the four assumptions listed above are incompatible. The argument of itself did not show that the postulate of change was the one to be rejected. Parmenides evidently chose to deny it because of his logically independent argument for the impossibility of void, and perhaps also on religious grounds. Now, since there is, notice the religious grounds. That's very
Okay.
important.
Yeah, I think you said, well, I believe
Parmenides,
people live over there probably quite more religious. That's why he and the Melissus all moved from Samos to Italy. So
oh, really? Okay, that's
I think
interesting.
it's because the Ionian area are more scientific. Okay.
Oh,
So for the people are more religious, they think they are crazy. So,
oh, yeah,
they
that's very,
cannot live well over there. They cannot have their circle of friends. So they decide to leave.
oh, right,
So
yeah.
they'll go to Italy, and
Oh,
their
okay,
place
yeah,
are
that's very interesting.
more religious for some reason. Same as
Yeah, that could be
Pythagoras, also from that area, right?
Pythagoras, definitely. Yeah, he was
Yeah.
very
So
spiritual, religious.
yeah, and because when they study, they find out the senses cannot be everything. The experience cannot be everything. They probably got enlightened for some reason. Got received the revolution from God. Who knows? And
Mm. Oh,
then.
yeah. Yeah,
And another reason is they probably have some relation with Jews because all the Greek philosophers, nobody talk about Jews. Okay.
no,
So
no, they
probably,
don't have much contact with the Jews at
well,
that.
I don't know, but that's my suspicion. So, but go ahead. So,
Yeah.
religious ground now.
Okay.
Okay.
Um,
Now, since there is no,
Now, since there is no inconsistency in assuming at once monism, conservation, and change, as the Atomists would show, Parmenides' reasoning would have been invalid without the premise of phenomenalism. Yet this premise seems incompatible with his conclusion that what is not at all what we perceive. Perhaps, however, Parmenides interpreted the third premise as implying only that what is must have to be some kind of quality capable of entering into some kind of consciousness. The property in question might have been just awareness itself. The fact that Melissus argued explicitly that the one could not suffer pain suggests that he thought it could suffer something, in other words, be somehow conscious. This lends some slight support to the conjecture that Parmenides' sphere, though undeniably a body, was also endowed with non-discursive consciousness, whatever that might be. If so, then there's a warrant for thinking of Parmenides as the father of idealism. You're on mute. Jason, can you hear me? You're on mute. Mute.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say that this last paragraph, where he once again comes up with kind of a interesting but not necessarily common sense argument that Parmenides is an idealist, is similar to these other later paragraphs in the McGill summary, which seem to be McGill just sort of speculating about things that were, not aren't, commonly considered. Because I read a lot of secondary material and I didn't hear anything about Parmenides being an idealist. I didn't read anything about Bradley. I didn't read all these last paragraphs seem to be, McGill putting in his 2 cents.
Yeah, actually, I do have, well, I think you answered my question. I just want to ask you, how do you agree or disagree on his
The
father?
last paragraph is totally novel. I didn't read it, anywhere else.
And the second part, they talk about the consciousness and talk about suffering. I totally not sure what McGill want to say. How do you think about that?
Well, he is trying to make an argument that Parmenides' system is a system of idealism, which relates to the paragraph earlier, which is how do you deal with consciousness? So is consciousness part of the one?
That's McGill's own question. That's McGill's refute the
Yeah.
rebuttal. Okay. on his argument, and
Yeah.
then he just tried to add. I think that's too much. I just want to reject this part of
Yeah.
it. Yeah, because I believe. Okay, that's what I believe. Okay, Parmenides is not idealism. Okay, he is, in a way, he is more materialism than idealism. Okay, let's put it this way.
Okay. Now, don't forget that he's not talking about Parmenides here. He's
Who
talking about Melissus.
Oh, he's talking about
Okay, so let
Melissus.
me read the sentence. It says, the fact that Melissus argued that the one could not suffer pain suggests that he thought that it could suffer something. Now, it's very interesting the way that McGill is able to introduce some of the ideas of Melissus, because Melissus is not a famous philosopher, but he was a part of the Eleatic school, just like Zeno was.
So here he talk about okay.
So this is Melissus, not Parmenides.
So he's talking about all this consciousness suffering is developed by Melissus, and then Melissus is the idealist, and then Parmenides is the father of idealists because he is his teacher. Okay, so okay, I think probably that's
well, put it this way. Melissus suggests that the unity being might have consciousness. And
so
his
you
work,
share this part, right?
Melissus's work is based on an interpretation of Parmenides. So that is how Parmenides is said to be the possible father of idealism.
Okay, so let me make it clear. So here, Melissus, right?
Yeah.
Two let's say improvement, okay, from Parmenides. One is infinity, right? He accept the concept of infinity.
That was an improvement, yeah.
Another improvement is the consciousness.
The improvement, I'm not sure it was an improvement or
it's arguable.
I'm calling it an interpretation.
Okay, interpretation.
It's
okay.
different improvement because he definitely disagrees with Parmenides as far as infinity.
Okay,
but in this case, he might just be interpreting him.
Okay, so second part, let's call it whatever you want to call. Second part different from Parmenides is consciousness, okay, the mind. Okay, so he bring these two, okay. So if you have an infinity and you have a mind, then definitely you can be called idealist, right? All right. If you see that's all the truth, like the idealist, then for this reason, Parmenides is the father of idealism.
I don't know.
But if do you want to call Melissus as idealist?
No, I don't even really know what idealism is, except for a rejection of matter. And just because being has consciousness, I don't really see how that would show idealism.
Okay, if you disagree, then he's not. Okay.
I don't know if I have a stand on Melissus, whether he's idealist. He said he's possibly an idealist, so maybe.
Okay, so we leave this one as a question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
so,
now the last thing I wanted to talk about is something important, which is that one of the secondary sources explained that Parmenides believes in the correspondence theory of truth, because he argued that whatever is can be thought, and therefore whatever we think must correspond with what is true. Okay?
I will not surprise.
Being, according to Parmenides, corresponds to the truth. Remember when he talks about the fact that that anything that is something that can be conceived. If you can't conceive it, then it can't be true. It can't be real. So they call this the correspondence view of truth, because there's correspondence between what is true and what exists.
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
He is not coherent.
that's not coherence. That's
Yeah,
correspondence.
yeah. I will not surprise. He
Now, I view this kind of correspondence, though, as different from the modern view of correspondence view of truth, which is
Oh,
based
okay.
on the empirical theory
Yes.
that whatever we state as true must correspond with the state of real affairs, the state of affairs in what is real.
But he is being on the being. Okay.
His base of truth is based on being
Yeah, okay.
rather than
So
states of affairs. And I would call it the rationalist view of truth as opposed to the empiricist view. Because how do we state propositions? Through what our senses tell us. And I
well,
think that's very important, because a lot of people throw around words like truth, and it's very confusing, because if you don't distinguish between different kinds of truth, then people just throw the word around and it gets very confusing.
yeah. So basically, we talk about correspondence truth.
Yeah,
Okay. It's a different kind of correspondence truth,
that's
right?
what I'm arguing, that there's
Yeah,
two
yeah.
kinds of correspondence truth.
It is. They have
At
another
least
kind
two
of
kinds.
they
This
have
is the correspondence truth based on being
they have
rather
another
than
kind
states
of
of affairs.
correspondence truth based on Bible. Okay, so
I don't know if that's ever been called correspondence truth,
well,
but maybe.
everything truth should be based on Bible, this book, Holy Scripture, right? So that's the correspondent truth, if you want to call it, right?
Yeah,
So we have the common truth,
yeah,
okay? We and you argue, and something disagree, we open the book, we check word by word, and then if it's there, truth, okay? So that's a
so that's another example of
yeah,
correspondence.
that's the holy correspondence.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a very important topic.
Oh
It
yeah, I
really
agree.
is.
I agree. I because you first you cannot easily say truth because they have a coherent truth or correspondent truth.
Yeah,
Okay. And even correspondent truth, they have the different kinds of because you have to correspondent to what, right?
yeah,
To the daily experience, the reality sometimes based on the nature, science paper. Okay. Whatever they said, you say that's true. That's another way to do it. That's
yeah,
not much different than based on Bible.
yeah. And I would argue that one thing that baffles people who are used to one kind of truth is when they hear the word truth thrown around, they're not really sure what the person is saying. And
Yeah.
people love to talk about truth,
But
and when they don't really describe what kind of truth they're talking about, it gets confusing. Yeah. Okay.
okay, so I think that's your final.
Yeah. How do you think? Yeah. Yeah. Turn the
I
recorder off.
well,
Did you already turn it off?
personally, this kind of philosophy is not the one I like by the philosophy itself. But I always interested to study how first, like you, the influence, the network.
Yeah. Exactly.
Secondly, his method, how philosophizing is also
Yeah. Me too.
my
Yeah.
interest. And third, I always give this kind of ancient people extra space because they are
Yeah.
ancient.
Me too.
So
Yeah.
another thing they have to try in a different way. They don't have a modern tool. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I
That's a good
already
point. Yeah.
forgive them more. So in this way, but anyway, that's probably my third time read Parmenides, and it's great, have
Yeah. Me too.
always have a different view, so that's a great.
Yeah, it was well worthwhile. It was definitely worthwhile. Yeah, it's not my favorite philosophy. It's not really the philosophy. It's not my philosophy at all. But I,
Yeah,
I
okay.
recognize that it represents an alternate kind of philosophy which deserves respect.
Yeah.
even though
Okay.
it's
So
different.
we done this one, and the next one we will talk about the Anaxagoras. Right?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay.